You think you have the right to argue with a manager? You're just a new hire. Know your place. Liam Porter's voice cut through the thick air of the fourth-floor conference room, cold and sharp as a blade. None of the 12 people seated around the long table said another word. Their eyes slid down to the pages of data in front of them, as if staring hard enough at the numbers could help them escape the discomfort seeping into every corner of the room. The one who had suddenly become the center of attention was Ryan Hale, a name that had only appeared in Sterling Core Solutions' software testing and integration team less than a month ago. Ryan didn't react immediately. He sat upright, his gaze calm, as if measuring every breath. There was no shouting, no slamming the table, not even a faint smirk of defiance. Only one short sentence from him had shifted the entire atmosphere. I reviewed the entire error log last night. The problem wasn't with Sophia, it was with a configuration variable being reset during the batch deployment. His voice was low, deliberate, and carried no hint of attack. Just minutes earlier, Sophia Grant, a 29-year-old QA engineer, had been bluntly accused by Liam of being the reason the release was delayed. She stood in front of the whiteboard, clutching a stack of printed system logs, her shoulders slightly hunched. Liam had cut off every attempt she made to explain, branding her as careless and unable to handle pressure, then adding an offhand comment everyone could hear. Not everyone's cut out to work in this environment. Eyes in the room had met briefly in fleeting glances before darting away. No one had stepped in, except Ryan. Liam's only response to Ryan's words was a short, forced smile full of disdain. You think you have the standing to speak up here? Your job is to watch and learn, not interrupt. His tone wasn't raised, but every word was coated in an icy layer that made the silence heavier. Ryan said nothing more. He sat back down, folded his hands, and kept his eyes on the data sheet. But the shift in the air was real. A few colleagues glanced at him, some pressing their lips together, some whispering a single word. Guts. Sophia quietly gathered her papers, gave Ryan a small nod, and left the conference room when the meeting ended. No one touched the subject that had just played out. No email was sent to seek clarification. Everything seemed to pass like a faint ripple across a still pond. But by the next afternoon, Ryan's employee badge no longer worked. A short message from HR contained just a few lines. After reviewing the incident involving team conflict, the company has decided to terminate your contract for violating the policy on maintaining team cohesion. The electronic signature was cold and emotionless. The process was carried out neatly, with no objections and no one asking for the deeper reason. He left the office with a half-finished cup of coffee and his laptop still plugged in at his desk. That was all. No farewells, no parting glances. But none of them, not even Liam or HR, knew that Ryan Hale had never truly existed in any official record. It was only a cover. Behind it was Ethan Cole, a 45-year-old man who had founded and led Sterling Core Solutions from a small room in his garage nearly 2 decades earlier, who had seen the company grow from 5 to 500 employees, from small outsourcing projects to million-dollar contracts, and who was now realizing that reports and dashboards full of numbers had hidden the reality of what was truly happening. Ethan hadn't stepped into the role of Ryan to amuse himself. He did it to rediscover the reason he had started the business, to hear with his own ears the things middle management had skillfully filtered out. He wanted to reconnect with the real heartbeat of the company, to feel the atmosphere and corners of the office no one had visited in ages. But what he saw, the silence when someone was treated unfairly, the hesitation to speak the truth, went far beyond anything he had imagined. Being fired from his own company wasn't part of the plan. But the moment his badge stopped working, Ethan knew he had gained something far more valuable than any internal report, an unfiltered snapshot of how the company culture truly operated when the boss wasn't in the room. And for Ethan, this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of change, from the top of the hierarchy, but starting at the very bottom of the system. The west side of the 4th floor at Sterling Core Solutions was never a popular destination. Rows of worn-out desks, swivel chairs that squeaked with every movement, and flickering fluorescent lights that never matched in tone made it an uninviting space. No one called it broken, but few ever volunteered to move there. This was the home of the systems integration team, 10 people in total, 3 of them on temporary contracts, all working under Liam Porter. Liam had been with the company for over 7 years, long enough to carve out a small territory of his own, not big enough to attract the attention of the executive board, but powerful enough to rule without interference. Within that territory, Sophia Grant was an exception. She wasn't the youngest, nor the newest hire, but she carried what Liam considered the greatest offense. She cared about process, about transparency, and about doing the job right rather than just fast. Sophia asked too many questions, challenged documents that didn't match the source code, and suggested improvements that could make the workflow more efficient. But those ideas clashed with Liam's old ways. He didn't shout, that would be too obvious. Instead, he excluded Sophia from meetings, publicly cast doubt on her figures, assigned her the tasks everyone else avoided, and then blamed her when they weren't completed on time. When she worked late, no one acknowledged it. When she achieved a breakthrough, the credit quietly went to someone else. Ryan saw it all. At first, he wanted to believe it was just a misunderstanding. But every meeting contained a well-timed put-down. Every sarcastic remark landed with precision until he could no longer deny it. This was a pattern, not an accident. One Friday night, when most of the office lights were off, Ryan passed by the war room and found Sophia still hunched over a stack of regression test reports. Without a word, he pulled up a chair, opened his laptop, and got to work. From then on, they formed a quiet routine, the two of them doing the work of 6, not for praise, but simply because someone had to care. Under the flickering lights, they shared packed lunches, joked about legacy code from long ago, and worked together to fix broken build pipelines. But deep down, Ryan felt something else creeping in, frustration. Not with Sophia or the team, but with himself. He had let things get to this point. His company, the one he had once believed would be different, was now letting people like Sophia be pushed into the shadows. And Sophia wasn't the only one. He saw Logan, a fresh graduate developer, freeze when Liam mocked him for asking a basic question. He saw Dana, a quiet but brilliant woman, submit a fantastic process improvement proposal, only to have it rejected because it didn't fit the leadership style. Ryan began taking notes. Not publicly, not ready to confront anyone just yet, but compiling a list of names, dates, and incidents. He wasn't sure what he would do with it, but he knew he couldn't pretend he hadn't seen it. Because the silence in this corner of the floor wasn't just fatigue, it was fear. And in a company that prided itself on innovation, fear was the fastest and deepest rot of all. The breaking point came just 2 weeks later during a sprint review. The air was already thick with deadline pressure. But it grew even heavier when Sophia raised her hand to report an anomaly in the deployment logs, a configuration variable that was inconsistent between the testing and production environments. Liam leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, and let out a mocking laugh. If you spent half as much time working as you do making excuses, maybe this team wouldn't be behind schedule. His voice carried across the room, enough to make everyone lower their eyes. Sophia's cheeks flushed, but her tone remained steady. I'm not making excuses. I'm preventing a bug that could cause the product to fail on release. Ryan looked around. Not a single pair of eyes met his. Logan stared down at the table. Dana pretended to check her laptop. Silence spread like a thick pane of glass. Everyone knew what was happening, but no one wanted to break it. He drew in a deep breath. The chair slid back with a faint sound as Ryan stood. His voice wasn't loud or harsh, but each word fell with clarity. I reviewed the logs. Sophia is right, the problem isn't hers. The entire room froze. A few heads lifted for a brief second, then quickly turned away. Liam blinked, then gave a short, dismissive smile. And who do you think you are to confirm that here? You're new to the team. Your job is to watch and learn, not to interrupt. Ryan didn't respond. He held his gaze, unblinking, as if the message was already clear enough. The tension in the air was so sharp, the hum of the air conditioner was suddenly distinct. Liam turned away and continued the meeting. but Ryan knew that moment had etched itself into everyone's memory. The next day at noon, a message from HR popped up on Ryan's screen. Please come to the HR office immediately to discuss an internal matter. The wording was cold, with no greeting, no explanation. In the room, Rachel Pierce, the HR representative for the technical division, spoke in an even tone, informing him that his actions had disrupted the meeting and were not aligned with the company's collaborative culture. There was no debate, no defense. Ryan understood this wasn't a conversation, it was procedure. The mutual separation agreement already bore a digital signature. His employee badge was deactivated before he even left the room. He returned to his desk one last time, looking at the computer screen still open, the cold coffee cup, and a hastily written note from Sophia that read, "Thank you for staying late last night. You're a lifesaver." He smiled, slipped it into his pocket. No goodbyes, no looking back. But he knew the silence he left behind would echo longer than any words he could have spoken. As he stepped out of the building, Ryan let the February wind lash against his face, as if to strip away the disguise that had just been torn off. A few blocks later, he finally zipped up his coat, his hand tightening slightly around Sophia's note in his pocket. He was no longer Ryan Hale, the newly joined engineer. He was once again Ethan Cole, 45 years old, founder and CEO of Sterling Core Solutions. Back at his apartment, Ethan sat down at the kitchen table. In front of him, the notebook now filled with pages of records, dates, names, exact quotes, and the events he had witnessed over the past month. Snippets of hallway conversations, the averted eyes when someone was publicly criticized, the proposals dismissed without explanation. All of it laid out clearly, no longer rumor or secondhand report. He knew the problem wasn't just one man named Liam Porter. What was rotting was the culture of silence, the thing that allowed apathy and abuse of power to exist as long as the numbers on the reports still looked good. Worse, that system had taken root and flourished in the very company he had built, a company he had believed would be different. Ethan had no illusions that he could fix everything in a day, but he understood that if he didn't start now, it would continue to consume people like Sophia. And to do that, he had to start at the root, with the person who maintained and benefited most from this toxic environment. That evening, he drafted a short email containing only a location and time. Conference Room 17B, Executive Floor, 9 o'clock a.m., Thursday. The sole recipient, Liam Porter. Beneath the final line, Ethan signed his real name, Ethan Cole. He pictured the moment Liam would open that email. In 7 years at Sterling Core, Liam had never once received a direct message from the CEO. The silence before the storm had begun. On Thursday morning, at exactly 8:55, Liam Porter stood in front of the frosted glass door of Conference Room 17B. His tie had been straightened for the third time, and he still wasn't sure what he was about to face. A single-line email, signed by Ethan Cole, had been enough to keep him awake for 2 nights. The receptionist on the executive floor didn't ask anything, only gave a nod to let him pass. That told Liam immediately this was no ordinary meeting. He took a deep breath and pushed the door open. Inside, the blinds were drawn, the light just enough to clearly see the man sitting at the head of the table. Ethan Cole wasn't wearing a suit or tie, only a deep blue shirt and eyes that were steady and cold, as if they had seen far more than he was willing to share. "Sit," Ethan said, his voice low but not loud. Liam pulled out a chair, trying to keep his posture straight. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Only the steady tick of the clock marked the pace of a conversation Liam knew he could not control. Ethan opened his leather case, pulled out a stack of papers, and slid them across the table toward Liam. On top was a printed Slack conversation, messages Liam had sent to another manager, each line highlighted in yellow. "That kid thinks he's a hero? All he did was embarrass me in front of the team. HR will handle it. No way he lasts more than a week. Just use not a cultural fit as the reason. Works every time." Liam read them, a chill running down his spine. When he looked up, Ethan's eyes hadn't moved from him. "I thought I had built a company where people could speak the truth. Ethan began, his tone even but each word heavy as stone. But instead, I've found an environment where silence is turned into a weapon. Mr. Cole, Liam started, but Ethan cut him off instantly, without raising his voice. Don't. You don't need to explain. I was there. I sat in your meetings. I heard you speak to people. I saw you erase their efforts, dismiss their voices, and make them believe their value wasn't worth hearing. There was no more room to maneuver. Ethan leaned forward slightly. Ryan Hale wasn't a new engineer from the West Coast. He was me. Liam's face drained of color. He opened his mouth but found nothing to say beyond short, shallow breaths. Ethan went on, I joined your team expecting to see imperfections. That's normal. What I didn't expect was cruelty disguised as management. I didn't expect that defending a colleague would become a reason to be pushed out the door. Liam swallowed hard, trying to hold on to composure, but Ethan gave him no time to think of a response. You don't pay attention unless it threatens your position. And when it does, you choose to protect your power instead of protecting people. The room fell silent again. Ethan stood, gathering the documents back into his case. When he turned, his voice dropped but was resolute. As of today, you will be reassigned to the compliance restructuring team at the Boston branch. No direct reports, no strategic decision-making authority. You will attend all mandatory ethics training. Liam couldn't speak. Sitting there, the shoulders that had always been tense in meetings now seemed pressed down, small and adrift. This conversation does not leave this room, Ethan added. I'm not interested in public drama. I'm interested in fixing what I allowed to break. But, he paused, locking his gaze on Liam, if I hear of you silencing anyone again, there won't be a meeting invitation first. Ethan walked out, letting the door close behind him. In the room, the air was still thick, but this time not because of oppressive power. It was because that power had just left, leaving behind an emptiness that would be hard to fill. The great hall at Sterling Core Solutions headquarters felt different that morning. Usually, the annual town hall was a tidy one-hour affair, a few slides full of charts, polite applause, and employees quietly slipping out before the program even ended. But this time, the moment people walked in, they could sense something unusual, a thin layer of tension, like the wind before a storm breaks. The stage had no row of seats for the leadership team, no massive logo glowing behind, only a single microphone standing under a lone amber spotlight. When the clock struck the hour, Ethan Cole stepped out. No suit, no tie, just a deep blue shirt and the same unassuming look he'd worn in the days when he was known as Ryan Hale. Murmurs rippled across the hall. A few people sat up straight, and the faces from the integration team seemed to hold their breath. They recognized immediately that this appearance was not for a routine speech. I want to tell you a story, Ethan began, his voice steady and deep, about someone who joined the company a few months ago. His name was Ryan. He was quiet, arrived early, left late, and always noticed everything happening around him. Ethan paused, scanning the room. Ryan saw a colleague blamed for a mistake she didn't make. He saw talented people ignored, their voices swallowed by silence. And one day Ryan spoke up. The next day, he was fired. The hall fell into silence. Not the polite kind, but the heavy kind, as if everyone knew that something like this had happened, or was still happening, around them. Some of you worked with Ryan, some helped push him out, and most of you stayed silent, not because you agreed, but because you were afraid. Ethan took a deep breath. I was Ryan. The sound in the hall erupted like a wave, sharp intakes of breath, chairs creaking as people sat up abruptly, murmurs of disbelief. Ethan let them have a few seconds to take it in. I didn't go undercover to test anyone, he continued. I did it because I wanted to see this company through your eyes. And what I saw, it broke my heart. We don't fail because of our products or our technology. We fail when we stop protecting each other. Behind him, the large screen lit up with just 3 words, courage to speak. This is not a slogan, Ethan said. This is a commitment. Starting today, we will have a secure channel for every employee to report abuse of power or retaliation. We will build a mentorship network led by those who have faced down silence. And we will evaluate leaders not only by their performance results, but by the culture they create. The applause began scattered, then spread until the entire hall thundered. Ethan raised a hand. Sophia Grant, will you join me up here? Sitting in the front row, Sophia froze for a moment, then walked up onto the stage. Ethan turned to her. You were treated unfairly. You stood firm in your integrity, even when it cost you. And this company is better because of it. He handed her a small card, no flashy title, just the words, Culture Lead QA Integration Rebuild Initiative. I want you to help us rebuild what we've lost. Sophia didn't cry. She nodded firmly. This time, the applause crashed down without restraint. In that moment, everyone knew something had truly changed. In the weeks following the town hall, Sterling Core Solutions did not transform with loud fanfare, but the change seeped into every corner like light filtering through a crack in the door. The silence that had once blanketed departments began to loosen. It wasn't an explosion of voices all at once, but tentative questions in meetings, more candid messages on internal channels, encouraging nods when someone dared to share a dissenting opinion. The integration team, once considered the dark corner of the company, became the center of a cultural rebuilding plan. In her new role, Sophia Grant didn't use her authority to retaliate or assert herself. She spent time sitting with each team, listening to stories that seemed trivial on the surface but were, in truth, links in the chain that had pushed people into silence. She worked with the HR department to review every feedback and evaluation process. The vague clauses that had once allowed leaders to legitimize dismissing opinions were replaced with clear, transparent criteria. Sophia joined the hiring panel to ensure that from the interview stage, candidates understood that the company valued its people as much as, if not more than, their performance metrics. Monday morning stand-up meetings changed entirely. Young employees like Logan no longer hesitated to ask questions. Dana began sharing her process improvement ideas without fear of being cut off, and even some team leads started making a conscious effort to create space for their reports to speak. As for Liam Porter, now in Boston, he sat in a small office within the compliance restructuring team. Gone were the half-smiles of the old days. Gone were the staff who had to tread carefully under his gaze. His schedule was packed with mandatory ethics training sessions and weekly reports on process improvement progress. No one at headquarters mentioned his name in daily conversations anymore. Ethan Cole, instead of returning to his spacious glass-walled office on the executive floor, began spending more time walking through the building. Some days he had lunch with the QA team. Other days he stopped by the programming room to see a new build. Sometimes he simply stood in the hallway, listening to stories that would never make it into a report. He understood the company could never be free of mistakes entirely. But what he was determined to preserve, above all else, was the feeling that every employee was seen, heard, and protected. The image of Ryan Hale, the man who had once been fired from here simply for speaking the truth, still lived in the minds of many, as a reminder that the courage to speak up was worth more than any KPI. One late weekend afternoon, Ethan Cole stood before the glass window, looking down at the city. The golden light of the setting sun spilled over the buildings, casting long shadows across the streets below. In his hand was not a financial report or a strategic plan, but Sophia's old note. Thank you for staying late last night. You're a lifesaver. He remembered the moment he was fired under the name Ryan Hale, the initial emptiness, followed by the awakening when he realized it was the clearest reflection of the company's condition. It was only when he was pushed out that he truly saw what had slipped from his grasp, a culture he had once promised to protect, but which had slowly been suffocated by silence and fear. Now as he walked through the hallways, he heard genuine laughter, not the forced kind used to ease tension. He saw hands raised in meetings without hesitation, no longer afraid of having their credibility undermined. He saw new ideas debated openly, not buried under the excuse of not fitting the leadership style. Ethan knew these changes were not the destination, but only the foundation. Culture cannot be fixed in a few weeks or months. It must be nurtured continuously through the actions of everyone, and his role was no longer to command from above, but to ensure that no one was left behind. He still hadn't told the full Ryan Hale story to the board of directors. They knew the results, they knew the improved metrics, but the details, the glances, the words swallowed into silence belonged to the people who had lived it, who had changed it. That was their story, not his alone. Before leaving the office, Ethan stopped by the fourth floor, pausing outside the conference room where it had all begun. The door was ajar, and inside he could hear voices and occasional laughter. He didn't step in. He simply stood there, smiling. Some victories don't need to be announced loudly. Some revolutions begin with a small word, but one strong enough to break the wall of silence. Ethan had lost the role of Ryan when he stood up for the truth, but in return, he regained something far more valuable, the promise that from now on, no one in the company would ever have to raise their voice just to be heard. Not ever again. From the perspective of someone who has led an organization, this story is not just about a CEO going undercover. It is proof that company culture is not found in slogans on the wall or in internal reports, but in how we treat one another when no one is watching. A system is only truly strong when every person within it feels safe to speak the truth and knows that their voice will be heard rather than punished. If this story has made you reflect on your own workplace, help spread the message by hitting like and subscribe so you don't miss more real-life stories like this. And I want to hear from you. Leave a comment with just 3 words. Dare to speak, as a reminder that silence is never the only option.